Disclaimer: Reggie and Royal's analysis and insights are based upon data gathered by it from various sources believed to be reliable, complete and accurate. However, no guarantee is made by Reggie and Royal, or Vision Associates LLC as to the reliability, completeness and accuracy of the information so analyzed. Reggie and Royal is in the business of gathering information, analyzing it and disseminating the analysis for informational and educational purposes only. Reggie and Royal attempts to analyze trends, not make recommendations. All statements and expressions are the opinion of Reggie and Royal and are not meant to be investment advice or solicitation or recommendation to establish market positions. Our opinions are subject to change without notice. Reggie and Royal strongly advises readers to conduct thorough research relevant to decisions and verify facts from various independent sources. Copyright 2021 Vision Associates LLC. All rights reserved.
All right, diving into this stack of sources you've shared about carbon credits and cryptocurrency, talk about an unexpected pairing. You're looking for the real deal on this emerging market. How does it work? What's the potential upside? But also, where are the pitfalls and controversies? We'll unpack it all.
Yeah, it is fascinating how two seemingly disparate worlds, carbon credits, combating climate change, and cryptocurrency, this disruptive financial tech, are becoming intertwined.
We're not just talking about some far-off future either. We've got actual companies, projects, even specific crypto tokens already playing in this space. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, I'm thinking a quick level setting on carbon credits themselves might be useful.
Definitely. Understanding the basics of carbon credits is key to grasping the implications when crypto enters the picture.
So from what I'm gathering, a carbon credit is essentially a permit, a tradable right, to emit a certain amount of CO2 or its equivalent in greenhouse gases. Is it oversimplifying to say it's like a permission slip to pollute, but the overall goal is actually to reduce that pollution?
That's a good way to think about it. By putting a price on pollution and creating this market for credits, there's an incentive for companies and individuals to make cleaner choices. The classic example is the EU Emissions Trading System, or EU ETS. Governments set emissions caps, and companies can trade allowances. If they go over, they need to buy more. If they emit less, they can sell their surplus.
So it's like cap and trade, but for the planet's health. Interesting. But alongside these compliance markets, there are also voluntary ones, right? What's the difference there?
In a nutshell, compliance markets are driven by government regulations, while voluntary markets are where individuals or companies choose to buy credits to offset their emissions, even without a legal obligation. Often it's driven by a desire to be more environmentally responsible or maybe boost their brand image.
Got it. So it's a mix of mandatory and doing the right thing. Now, this is where things get particularly interesting. Cryptocurrency enters the scene. We're seeing these so-called cryptocarbon credits pop up. What are those exactly?
Think of them as tokens on a blockchain. But these tokens represent retired carbon credits. This means the original credit has already been used to offset emissions and is permanently out of circulation. What makes this interesting is the potential for increased transparency. Every transaction is recorded on the blockchain, making fraud or double counting much harder.
That makes a lot of sense. With traditional carbon credits, there seems to be more room for things to go awry. But how does this fractionalization thing everyone's talking about play into crypto carbon credits?
Imagine wanting to invest in a company's stock, but you can't afford a whole share. Fractionalization allows you to buy a portion, giving you exposure to the market without the full cost. Cryptocarbon credits work similarly. They can be divided into smaller, more affordable units.
So it's opening up the market to players who might not have had the capital to participate before. That's a pretty big shift. And what about this idea that blockchain tech means faster transactions and global reach?
Precisely. The buying and selling are streamlined, making it more efficient and potentially bringing down costs. But of course, with all this talk of crypto for climate, we can't ignore the big question: Bitcoin.
Right, there's that elephant in the room. Bitcoin and its notorious energy consumption, particularly with that proof-of-work mining it uses. Doesn't that clash with the whole idea of using crypto for environmental good?
It's a valid concern. To put it in perspective, Bitcoin mining uses as much energy as entire countries. But it's important to note that there's a considerable push to make crypto mining greener.
So instead of fossil fuels, it's about powering those mining rigs with solar, wind, things like that. But how much of Bitcoin is actually running on renewables right now?
It's difficult to get an exact figure. There's no central authority tracking that data. Some studies suggest renewable energy sources account for around 39% of the total energy consumed by the Bitcoin network. So it's a decent chunk, but there's clearly a lot of room for improvement.
A long way to go before we can claim Bitcoin is truly green. Are there efforts beyond just switching energy sources, though? Can they reduce the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining itself?
There's a lot of work being done on that front, especially when it comes to the energy efficiency of mining hardware. Next-generation miners are significantly more efficient, requiring less electricity for the same computational work. Think about how computers have evolved. They become more powerful while using less energy over time.
So it's about squeezing more computational juice out of each unit of energy. Interesting. But what about those emissions that are still happening even with these improvements? Is offsetting a viable option?
It is. Carbon offsetting is a common practice in the crypto space. We see exchanges purchasing carbon credits to offset emissions from their operations, including mining activities on their platforms. Similarly, individual Bitcoin miners and mining companies are stepping up and voluntarily purchasing carbon offsets.
It's like trying to balance the scales, creating a positive to counter the negative. But isn't this all a bit risky given how volatile the crypto world is? Has that volatility spilled over into the crypto carbon market?
Unfortunately, yes. There's been a classic hype cycle with early cryptocarbon projects seeing wild price swings. Take the climate token, for instance. It went from $6 to $170, then crashed back down.
That's got to be rough for anyone who bought in at the peak. Are there any other controversies surrounding these crypto carbon credits?
There have been a few. Vera, a major carbon registry, actually banned the tokenization of its credits. They raised concerns about double counting and the lack of quality control, which are valid points. It highlights the need for caution in this still developing market.
So while there's a lot of potential, there's also a need for a healthy dose of skepticism. It sounds like it's still early days for cryptocarbon, and things could go either way.
Absolutely. It's like any frontier. There's the potential for great innovation and positive change, but also the risk of things going wrong.
Let's try to weigh the potential benefits and the potential risks here. What are the key advantages of using crypto and blockchain for carbon markets?
Well, the potential is there to draw more investment into emissions reduction projects, make the market more accessible and transparent, and streamline the whole process.
And on the flip side, what are the red flags people should be watching out for?
The risks primarily revolve around price volatility fueled by speculation, the chance of dubious carbon credits being tokenized, and the lack of robust regulation. It's a mixed bag, as is often the case with crypto.
So it's not a guaranteed silver bullet for the climate crisis. What about other approaches to cutting emissions outside of relying on carbon markets, whether traditional or crypto-based? What are some of the alternatives out there?
There are several promising avenues. Regulated cap-and-trade programs, like the EU ETS, often have more stringent standards than voluntary markets and benefit from government oversight. Then there's internal carbon pricing, where companies put an internal cost on their emissions to incentivize reductions within their own operations and supply chain.
It's like taking responsibility directly rather than relying solely on offsets. Are there any other options on the table?
One that's frequently discussed is carbon taxes, where governments directly tax emissions to incentivize reductions. This puts a clear price on pollution. However, setting the right price is crucial. Too low, and it won't significantly impact emissions. Too high, and it could harm the economy or unfairly burden specific industries or communities.
It's a delicate balancing act. What are some other approaches that have caught your eye?
Community-driven offset programs are particularly interesting. These are smaller-scale projects designed and implemented by local communities, often in developing countries. They focus on things like reforestation, sustainable agriculture, or energy efficiency improvements, bringing benefits not only to the climate but also to local livelihoods and community resilience.
That's a fantastic model addressing climate change while empowering communities. What are some other alternatives to these more traditional carbon markets?
There's also regenerative agriculture, which utilizes farming practices that help sequester carbon in the soil. This is a natural way to remove carbon from the atmosphere and simultaneously improve soil health.
So we're fighting climate change and improving food security at the same time. I like it. Anything else?
We also have energy attribute certificates, or EACs. These track the generation of renewable energy and can be traded independently from the electricity itself. They incentivize the development of renewable energy projects and ensure consumers are getting genuine green power when they pay for it.
It's like a seal of authenticity for clean energy. What I'm hearing is that there's no shortage of ideas and approaches out there. But it seems like something new is emerging these partnerships between traditional carbon market players and crypto blockchain projects.
That's right. There's a growing recognition that these two worlds can leverage each other's strengths. Traditional players bring deep expertise in climate science and carbon offsetting methodologies, while crypto developers bring technical innovation and blockchain expertise.
So it's like a match made in climate action heaven. Do we have any examples of these partnerships already in motion?
Absolutely. Toucan Protocol and ClimateCare are a great example. Toucan provides the blockchain infrastructure, and ClimateCare, a major carbon project developer, supplies the credits backing Toucan's tokens. Then we have Vera, the carbon registry, exploring the use of EnergyWeb's blockchain to boost transparency and track carbon credit ownership changes.
It's encouraging to see this kind of collaboration taking shape. So, where do you see the future of cryptocarbon credits heading, given all of this?
That's the million-dollar question. Several scenarios could play out. We might see increased regulation, which could stabilize the market and lend it legitimacy, but potentially stifle innovation. There's also the potential for further technological innovations with blockchain, AI, and other technologies improving transparency, verification, and access to carbon markets.
The pace of technological development is incredible. It's hard to imagine what's possible even a few years down the line. What else might shape this market's future?
Another factor to consider is the potential for competition between crypto-based and traditional carbon markets. Which approach will prove more effective and scalable in the long run remains to be seen. But I think the key takeaway, regardless of which technology or approach prevails, is the need for balanced governance, purpose-driven collaboration, and continuous innovation.
I love that emphasis on collaboration. It feels like the secret sauce to solving any complex challenge, especially one as big as climate change. And speaking of tackling big challenges head on, we've danced around it enough. Let's dive into Bitcoin and its energy consumption.
You're right, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, especially when discussing crypto's potential role in climate solutions. Let's explore what's being done to address Bitcoin's carbon footprint and whether crypto mining can truly become a force for greening the energy sector.
That sounds like the perfect segue into part two of this deep dive. See you there.
All right, let's dig into this issue of Bitcoin's energy consumption. It's true, we can't just sweep it under the rug, especially when we're talking about the potential of crypto to contribute to climate solutions.
It does feel a bit paradoxical, doesn't it? Using a technology known for its energy intensity to address climate change.
It might seem counterintuitive at first glance, but the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining, it isn't inherently bad. It's the source of that energy that truly matters.
So if miners are using renewable energy sources, then the carbon footprint of Bitcoin mining shrinks significantly.
Exactly. And there's a growing movement toward miners seeking out renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydro, even geothermal. Some are strategically setting up shop in regions with abundant renewable resources like Iceland or certain parts of the U.S.
Following the sunshine or the wind to power those mining rigs. Clever. But how much of Bitcoin mining is actually powered by renewables right now? Do we have any hard data on that?
It's a tough question to answer definitively because there's no central authority tracking this data. Estimates vary, but some studies suggest renewable energy sources currently make up around 39% of the total energy consumed by the Bitcoin network.
So it's a sizable chunk, but there's still a long way to go before we hit that 100% renewable powered Bitcoin mining goal.
Absolutely. But progress is being made. And it's not just about shifting to renewables. There are other avenues to explore when it comes to reducing the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining itself.
Such as, what else is being done on that front?
One area of focus is enhancing the energy efficiency of the mining hardware itself. We're seeing the development of next-generation miners that are significantly more efficient, requiring less electricity to do the same amount of computational work.
It's like the evolution of computers in general. They've become more powerful while using less energy over time. Makes sense that mining hardware would follow a similar trajectory.
Precisely. And there's also innovation happening in data center design and cooling systems. Optimizing these aspects allows mining operations to further reduce their energy consumption.
So it's about squeezing more computational power out of each unit of energy. Makes sense. But even with these improvements, there are still emissions being produced. Are there ways to offset those remaining emissions?
Yes, there are. Carbon offsetting is a common approach, and we see it happening in several ways within the crypto space. For example, Some cryptocurrency exchanges are buying carbon credits to offset the emissions associated with their operations, including any mining activities happening on their platform.
So they're balancing their carbon footprint by investing in projects that reduce emissions elsewhere. It's a bit like trying to make amends, environmentally speaking.
That's a good way to put it. And we're also seeing individual Bitcoin miners and even entire mining companies voluntarily purchasing carbon offsets as a way to take responsibility for their environmental impact and contribute to climate action.
It seems like there are a lot of different players and moving parts involved in making crypto, and specifically Bitcoin, more sustainable.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about Bitcoin going green in isolation. The broader crypto industry needs to step up and take responsibility for its environmental footprint.
And it seems like there's growing awareness of this within the crypto community, which is encouraging.
There is, and it's translating into action. We're witnessing the emergence of initiatives like the Crypto Climate Accord, which we touched on earlier. This accord sets the ambitious goal of the entire cryptocurrency industry achieving net zero emissions by 2040.
That's a big goal. But it's heartening to see that kind of collective action gaining momentum. Are there any concrete plans or strategies within the Crypto Climate Accord to make this happen?
Absolutely. The Crypto Climate Accord is more than just setting targets. They're actively developing practical solutions and tools to help the industry transition to a more sustainable future.
Okay, hear me out on this one. It might sound a bit out there, but do you think crypto mining could actually become a force for greening the energy sector as a whole?
It's not as far-fetched as it might seem at first. There are a few ways this could potentially play out. For one, the increasing demand for renewable energy from crypto miners could actually stimulate investment in new renewable energy projects.
So it's like creating a new market for clean energy, driven by the needs of the crypto industry.
Exactly. And because crypto mining can be done pretty much anywhere there's access to electricity, it could help accelerate the deployment of renewables in regions that are currently underserved by traditional energy infrastructure.
That's an interesting point. It could help bring clean energy to parts of the world that need it the most. Are there other ways crypto mining could contribute to a greener energy future?
Another fascinating aspect is that crypto mining can provide a flexible source of demand for electricity.
Flexible demand. I'm not sure I follow.
Unlike many industrial processes that require a constant and predictable supply of energy, crypto mining operations can adjust their energy consumption up or down based on things like electricity prices or the availability of renewable energy.
So they can act as a kind of buffer for the grid, ramping up when there's excess renewable energy and scaling back when demand is high or renewables are scarce.
Precisely. Miners can essentially act as energy buyers of last resort for renewable energy projects, helping to stabilize the grid and make renewables more economically viable.
That makes a lot of sense. But wouldn't this approach make the profitability of crypto mining less predictable?
It could, but it also creates opportunities for innovative business models. We're seeing miners partner with renewable energy providers, essentially acting as guaranteed buyers for excess renewable energy that might otherwise go to waste.
So it's a win-win situation. The miners get access to cheap, clean energy, and the renewable energy projects get a reliable buyer for their electricity. Sounds promising, but are there any challenges or potential downsides to this model?
Of course, there are always challenges. One of the big ones is the need for greater transparency and accountability within the crypto mining industry.
Right. It's crucial to be able to track where the energy is coming from and verify that it's truly renewable. Greenwashing is a real concern in any industry, especially when there's money to be made.
Absolutely. And there are also regulatory hurdles to overcome. Governments need to create policies that encourage the use of renewables for crypto mining, rather than hindering innovation. It's a complex issue that requires careful consideration and collaboration between the crypto industry, policymakers, and energy providers.
It sounds like this idea of crypto mining as a driver of green energy is still very much in its early stages, with a lot of potential, but also a lot of work to be done.
You've hit the nail on the head. And it's just one piece of the larger puzzle when it comes to addressing the climate crisis.
Speaking of other pieces of the puzzle, we spent a lot of time discussing carbon markets and crypto, but what about all those other approaches to reducing emissions that we hear about? Are there viable alternatives out there?
Absolutely. Let's shift gears and explore some of those alternatives and see how they might complement or perhaps even compete with the crypto-based solutions we've been discussing.
Let's do it. I'm eager to hear more about what else is being done to tackle this global challenge. Okay, we've delved into carbon markets, explored those fascinating crypto carbon credits, grappled with Bitcoin's energy consumption conundrum, and even considered the potential for crypto mining to become a force for good in the energy sector. But I'm curious, what about all those other approaches to reducing emissions that we keep hearing about? Where do those fit into the picture?
Yeah, you're right. It's important to remember that carbon markets, whether traditional or those leveraging crypto, are just one tool in a much larger toolbox when it comes to tackling climate change. There's a whole spectrum of approaches out there, each with its strengths and weaknesses.
Right, like those regulated cap and trade programs we touched on earlier. The EU emissions trading system, or a EU ETS, always comes to mind as a prime example. What makes those different from the voluntary carbon markets we discussed?
The biggest difference is that cap and trade programs are mandatory. Governments set limits on emissions for certain industries, and companies have to comply. It's the law. This creates a much stronger incentive to reduce emissions, because exceeding those limits, well, comes with penalties.
So it's a stick rather than a carrot approach compared to those voluntary markets where participation is more about corporate social responsibility or brand image.
That's a good way to put it. And cap and trade programs tend to have stricter standards for the carbon credits that can be used for compliance, which helps to ensure higher quality and that the environmental impact is truly positive.
Makes sense. What about carbon taxes? They always seem to generate heated debate, but they strike me as a pretty straightforward way to put a price on pollution, don't they?
They do. A carbon tax is a direct levy on the carbon content of fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, the usual suspects. By making those fossil fuels more expensive, it encourages businesses and consumers alike to shift towards cleaner alternatives.
It's like saying, hey, if you're going to pollute, you've got to pay for the privilege. But I imagine there's a lot of debate about the best way to implement carbon taxes right for.
There is. One of the biggest challenges is setting the right price for carbon. If it's too low, it won't have a meaningful impact on emissions. But if it's too high, it could hurt the economy or disproportionately burden certain industries or communities. For instance, a high carbon tax could raise energy prices, which might be harder for low-income households to absorb. It's a delicate balance.
Finding that sweet spot where it's effective but not overly burdensome, are there any other approaches that stand out to you, ones that maybe take a different tack altogether?
One that I find particularly intriguing is community-driven offset programs. These tend to be smaller-scale projects designed and implemented by local communities, often in developing countries.
It's like grassroots climate action happening at a hyper-local level. I imagine that's incredibly empowering for those communities to have ownership and agency over their climate solutions.
Exactly. And these programs often focus on things like reforestation, sustainable agriculture, or energy efficiency improvements in rural areas. The benefits go beyond just climate impact. They often improve local livelihoods, enhance biodiversity, and strengthen community resilience. It's a holistic approach.
I love that it's not just about offsetting emissions, but also about creating tangible benefits for the people on the ground. But are there any drawbacks or challenges associated with these community-driven programs?
One of the primary challenges is ensuring that these programs are properly designed and implemented, and that the carbon offsets generated are legitimate and verifiable. It can be difficult for smaller community-based organizations to navigate the complexities of carbon markets and meet the standards required by buyers.
So access to resources and expertise becomes a crucial factor in their success. Makes sense. What other alternatives to traditional carbon markets have we got?
There's also regenerative agriculture, which is gaining a lot of traction. It's about using farming practices that actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in the soil.
So we're talking about things like cover cropping, no-till farming, crop rotation, those kinds of practices, right?
Exactly. It's a win-win because it not only mitigates climate change, but also improves soil health, increases biodiversity, and can even boost crop yields. It's like fighting climate change and boosting food security in one fell swoop.
Talk about a positive feedback loop. What else is on the menu of climate solutions?
We also have energy attribute certificates, or EECs. These track the generation of renewable energy and can be traded separately from the electricity itself. They provide a way to incentivize the development of renewable energy projects and ensure that consumers are actually getting what they pay for when they buy green power.
So it's like a certificate of authenticity for renewable energy. It prevents greenwashing and gives consumers confidence that they're truly supporting clean energy. I like that. But with all these different approaches swirling around, what do you think is the most promising path forward? Is there one that stands out as the clear winner?
It's tempting to look for a silver bullet, but I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution. The best approach will likely vary depending on specific context, whether we're talking about a country, a region, an industry, or even a local community.
So it's more about having a diverse toolkit and choosing the right tools for the job rather than clinging to any single approach as the ultimate solution.
Precisely. It's about adapting and tailoring solutions to the specific needs and circumstances. And I think we're likely to see a combination of approaches being used, rather than any single approach dominating the landscape. The key is to keep innovating, experimenting, and learning from what works and what doesn't.
It's about being pragmatic and constantly iterating, which is good advice for tackling any complex challenge, not just climate change. So, what does all of this mean for our listener who's been patiently absorbing all of this information? It seems like there's a lot to consider.
Well, the world of carbon credits and cryptocurrency is evolving rapidly. There are undoubtedly opportunities for innovation and investment, but it's crucial to be aware of the risks too. This deep dive has given you a solid foundation to understand this complex landscape. But like with anything in finance and technology, it's crucial to do your own research, ask critical questions, and stay informed about the latest developments. Don't just take our word for it, be an active participant in your learning journey.
And don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Carbon markets, whether traditional or those embracing crypto, are just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. We need a multifaceted approach that includes smart government policies, continuous technological innovation, and let's not forget, changes in individual and collective behavior. It's going to take all of us.
I completely agree. And it's at this intersection of different approaches where I think things get really interesting. Imagine a future where blockchain technology is used to track and verify emissions reductions in community-driven offset programs, or where carbon taxes are integrated with crypto-based carbon markets to create a more efficient and transparent system.
That's a compelling vision. It's about breaking down silos and finding creative ways to combine the best of different approaches. It's about embracing collaboration and out-of-the-box thinking.
Exactly. That's the kind of innovative mindset we need to tackle this multifaceted challenge. We need all hands on deck, bringing our diverse perspectives and expertise to the table.
So, to our listener, we say, keep questioning, keep exploring, and stay tuned as the story continues to unfold. It's a story that's going to shape our world for generations to come.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the one to come up with the next breakthrough solution. The future is unwritten, and your curiosity and engagement could be the spark that ignites real change.
Until next time, stay curious, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive.